Welcome to day 6 of my 14-day SAT prep series. In today's video, we're going to start off by going through some math tips and tricks that I think you should know for the SAT math section. That's both the math with calculator section and the math without calculator section. So as I go through those math tips and tricks, I'm going to teach you how to be efficient on the math section, what to look for, what sort of setups and patterns you can identify in the SAT math section to get to your answer faster, and overall the insights and tips and tricks that I used to score perfectly on the SAT math section on back-to-back SATs. Then after that, I'm going to go through a couple reading passages. I'll do 2 reading passages in total, one of which is a dual passage section, so that's a passage 1 and 2 with a singular question set, so about 11 questions dealing with 2 passages together. And then that is obviously going to be for that one, that is a history passage, and then after that I will do a singular social science passage as well. So as I go through those reading passages, I'll be giving you the strategies, the tips, and the tricks that I used to score 1590 on the SAT, particularly dealing with the reading section. So those strategies for the reading section as far as how to be efficient, how to get rid of wrong answer choices, how to identify wrong answer choices, and how to use that process of elimination to get to your correct answer choice. So overall, really showing you how to be efficient on the reading section and how to be accurate on the reading section. So with that, let's go and get started with the math tips and tricks. And as always, make sure to like, share, and subscribe. Here is an SAT math tip and trick for you that deals with canceling units and cost equations. So to illustrate these tips, I'm going to take a look at question 15 from SAT Practice Test 5. So the question says, Alan drives an average of 100 miles each week. His car can travel at an average of 25 miles per gallon of gasoline. Alan would like to reduce his weekly expenditure on gasoline by $5. Assume gasoline costs $4 per gallon. Which equation can Alan use to determine how many fewer average miles M he should drive each week? Okay, so in this case, I have a cost equation. I want to reduce my cost by $5. So I'm going to set it equal to $5. Now I want to use my variable M for how many less average miles I'm driving. Okay, so my variable M is going to be my miles that I'm driving less, so my decrease in miles. Now I want to end with $5, right? So I'll put that right there. And this is where the canceling units comes in. If you can use units to cancel, you're going to be able to help yourself get to the correct answer. I'm going to show you why here. So we're going to have some amount of miles, M. Now we need to cancel miles because our final answer has to be in dollars. So if we're going to cancel miles and we have miles in our numerator right now, in our denominator we have to have some sort of miles, right? Now in this case, if I take a look at everything that I've underlined, the obvious choice here is going to be my 25 miles per gallon, okay? Why would I not pick that 100 miles each week? Because that's not including my gallons, and I also need my gallons to cancel because my cost is $4 per gallon. So up top, I'm going to have my $4 per gallon because I need dollars in my numerator in order to get, I need gallons in my numerator and in my denominator so that they cancel. So I'll go ahead and show you that. I've got $4 per gallon as my cost per gallon. I need to divide that then by that 25 miles per gallon. Okay, we see here that I have gallon over gallon. All right, I'll put that in red so you can see it. I'll underline it. We have a gallon over gallon. So those two are going to cancel. I also see I have amount of miles multiplied by a amount of miles driven M, right? Capital, I'll put a capital M there, just so you understand that that is my miles driven M. Put a capital M right there. I'll put it in black so that you can see it better. So we got our miles driven there, right? So now we see that our gallons are going to cancel. We see that our miles are going to cancel. We're going to be left with that $5 cost. So this is the equation that we're going to want. Another way that you can look at this as well is you can just think, if I want to save $5 and I have to drive a certain amount of miles less, I have to multiply then by the cost per mile, which means I'm going to take that $4 and I've got to split that $4 cost per gallon over how many miles I get per gallon. So that's another way you can think about these cost equations. Is you're driving some amount of miles M, you need the average cost per mile, which is going to be that $4 per gallon over the 25 miles you're getting per gallon. So you want to get it into that average cost per mile, and that's how you would do that. So correct answer here, if we look at our equations, we need to have 4 over 25 M equals 5, and we see that that answer there is going to be D. So D would be the correct answer there. So the big things to understand here is canceling units. We see in this one our gallons are going to cancel, our miles are going to cancel, and we're going to be left with our final answer in dollars, just like we need according to our question. And you see that the canceling of units can make sure you have things in the right place, right? For example, let's say you had 25 over 4. Your units will not cancel then, right? You had 25 miles per gallon all over $4 per gallon. And keep in mind that I'm showing you this. This is obviously the wrong answer, right? I showed you the correct answer. Now I'm showing you the wrong answer. So I'll actually write this all in red so you know it's wrong. But I just want to show you how the units won't cancel if you do it wrong. If you were to do this question wrong and you thought 25 went up top, I'm going to show you how your units aren't going to cancel out. All right, so if you had 4 on bottom, $4 per gallon, you see that your gallons will still cancel, but your miles, all right, you got to multiply by your amount of miles. Your miles, you're going to end up with miles squared. okay, because you have miles in your numerator and multiplied by it again in your numerator right there. So you'd end up with miles squared, and you need it to equal dollars. So that's a way that you can know if your answer is correct or incorrect, is if you get the wrong units. Okay, so that's an example of how canceling units is going to help you make sure that you're doing the problem correctly. All right, so hopefully that was helpful. Here is an SAT tip and trick for you that deals with raising a number to the power of 0 and also flipping a function over its x-axis. So to illustrate these two tips, I'm going to take a look at question 14 from SAT Practice Test 5. So if we look at question 14 from SAT Practice Test 5, it tells us that f of x is equal to 2 to the power of x plus 1. It says the function f is defined by the equation above. Which of the following is the graph of y equals negative f of x in the xy plane? Well, if we're going to do this, we know that y is equal to negative f of x. So what we're going to do then is take f of x, and we're just going to put a negative sign in front of this 2 to the power of x and this plus 1. So we put a negative sign in front of that. Now we have negative f of x. So all we're going to do then is graph this equation. Now the first thing that I'm going to look for whenever I'm graphing an equation is obviously where my y-intercept is going to be. So my y-intercept is going to be where x equals 0. So if I put a 0 in here for x, then I'm going to have 2 raised to the 0 power. Now anything raised to the power of 0 is 1. So keep in mind, if you have 2 raised to the power of 0, 1 raised to the power of 0, 10,000 raised to the power of 0, anything raised to the power of 0 is going to equal 1. Okay, some people argue about whether or not 0 raised to the 0 power is 1 or if it's 0, but you don't have to worry about that because I don't think that they'd ever put that on the SAT math section because it's not really agreed upon mathematicians. Just know anything raised to the 0 power is going to be 1. Okay, so we got 2 raised to the 0 power, we know that's going to be 1. So now we're going to have negative 1 plus 1, we know that's going to equal negative 2. Okay, so when x is 0, we need to have our graph be at negative 2 for y. So I look at option A, I see I don't have that, A must be wrong. I look at option B, I see B is at negative 1, that one must be wrong as well. I look at option C, I see that that does have my y-intercept at negative 2, so that could be correct. I look at D, I see that that's at negative 1, I see my answer then must be C. Alright, so I know my answer there has to be C. Now another way that you could go ahead and get rid of options A and option B as answer choices, or at least option B, is when you look at, or really option A and B, is just if you were to take a look at the original equation, right? So I'll erase this so you can see it. We have 2 to the power of x plus 1, right? So we know that if we just plotted this and we ignored this negative sign, it looks something like this, right? It'd be increasingly exponential, right? It'd just keep going higher and higher. Okay, so then if we're going to flip that over its x-axis, we would have our graph look something like this, where we go increasingly down. Okay, so we would have to go increasingly down. We see in option A, we don't do that. We see in option B, we don't do that. So right off the bat, you could get rid of those two. You'd be between A and D at that point. And that's where understanding that anything raised to the power of 0 equals 1 comes in handy, because by doing that, you can find your y-intercept, find what the correct answer is. So hopefully this video is helpful. The big things to take away are that anything raised to the power of 0 is going to equal 1, and then also just understanding that if you have y equals negative f of x, you're just flipping f of x over its x-axis. So those are the two big things to understand from this video. Hopefully it was helpful. Today I have an SAT math tip for you that deals with having a common denominator when adding and subtracting fractions. So if we take a look at question 19 from SAT Practice Test 5, we have 2x plus 6 over x plus 2 squared minus 2 over x plus 2. So in order to get a common denominator here, we need to multiply by x plus 2 in our denominator and x plus 2 in our numerator. Now when we do that, we have to distribute that negative 2 to our x and our 2. So now when we do that, what we're going to be left with is we're going to have 2x plus 6 all over our x plus 2 squared minus 2x plus or minus 4, right? Because we have our negative 2 times 2, which will give us minus 4. Okay, so we'll have minus 2x and then minus 4. Minus 2x and minus 4. And obviously that's all over x plus 2 squared, since that is indeed our common denominator. So at this point, you see you're going to have 2x, and I'll put this in blue. You're going to have a 2x here, minus 2x here. Those are going to cancel. Then you'll have a plus 6 minus 4. 6 minus 4 is going to leave you with 2. Now keep in mind, you always want to pay attention on the SAT math section to what you're asked to answer with, and that's the value of a. We know a is what is in our numerator in our answer, so then our answer there would be 2. So the big thing for this tip and trick is just understanding if you're going to add or subtract fractions, you need to have a common denominator. So hopefully this video is helpful. Today I have an SAT math trick for you that deals with setting up inequalities as you read through a math word problem. So this applies to the math no calculator section and the math with calculator section. So as always, make sure to like, subscribe, and share, and let's go ahead and get into it. So we have SAT practice test 7, and we're going to be dealing with question 9. So what I want to show you here is when I deal with question 9, as I go through it, one thing I immediately recognize just by glancing at the answer choices is that I'm going to have to set up a system of inequalities that would be used to solve this problem. Now, I don't actually have to solve the problem. I just have to find the correct system of inequalities that would be able to solve this problem. So now, the other thing that really jumps out to me here is that I've got 4 equations here. Okay, now since I have 4 equations, I know I probably am not going to need all 4 of them because there's only 4 multiple choice things and they're going to flip signs and things like that. So I know I'll probably be able to solve this after finding 2 or 3 of the correct ones. I'll know that I have the right answer just by process of elimination, since the other ones will have to be wrong. So as I go through here, my first time through, I'm just going to go through it and I'm going to teach you, and then the second time through, I'm going to show you why this saves so much time by going through how I would if I were taking the SAT. All right, so as I go through this, just pay attention. I'll go slow the first time, and then the second time I'll show you how you can do this really quickly. So we have Marissa needs to hire at least 10 staff members for an upcoming project. Thing that jumps out to me right away is it says at least 10. So if I go down here and I look at my things with 10, I know I need to have at least 10. I see an A that it has less than 10, so that immediately to me is suggesting that A is wrong. Then I look at B, I see it has greater than 10. I look at C, it has greater than 10. I look at D, it has less than 10. That again suggests to me that D is going to be incorrect. So now I'm looking at B and C as my potential correct answers. I see the staff members will be made up of junior directors who will be paid $640 per week and senior directors who will be paid $880 per week. Now I don't know which one X and Y is yet, but I know that I've got $640 and $880. I see all of them have that, so that's fine. Her budget for paying the staff members is no more than $9,700 per week. Key part here is no more. She can't spend more than $9,700. Therefore, $9,700 must be greater than that 640X plus that 880Y. Now I know I'm between B and C here because that part with 10, right, dealing there, I know that those both are correct here, so I can check mark those two. Next thing I'm looking at is it said no more than 9,700. I see in C it shows it does have more, so I know C is wrong. I know B will be my correct answer just based on that, and I'll go ahead and show you how I know that that's correct as I go through and it tells us what X and Y mean. Right, we can go ahead and check our work. If I was in a rush, I would just click B and or select B and move on. But if we had plenty of time, wanted to check our work, we could go ahead and keep reading, and I'll show you why that's correct. She must hire at least 3 junior directors, at least 1 senior director, which of the following system of inequalities represents conditions described. If X is the number of juniors, Y is the number of seniors. Obviously, it's got to add up to at least 10, right? X and Y do, so we know that A and D are automatically out. So then we're between B and C, and then obviously we know based on this top equation that B has to be correct. Okay, so obviously that's a really quick thing that you can use when dealing with setting up systems of inequalities to find the correct answer very fast. Now, if I were going through this on my own and I wasn't explaining it to you, I'm just going to show you how quickly I can get to this right answer. If I was in a rush, or if I just needed to move quick, or was trying to move quicker than I normally do, right? Or for me, this would just be my natural pace because I can move through these problems pretty quickly. I just want to show you how quick we can get to that correct answer of B. All right, so this is going to be a non-slowed down version that I'm going to go through right now. Okay, so I see the question 9, and this is how I'd approach if I were taking the SAT myself. Marissa needs to hire at least 10 staff members for an upcoming project. I go down, see which ones have greater than 10. I see that my only options here are going to be B and are going to be C, so I go ahead and get rid of D and I get rid of A. Next thing I'm looking at is whatever comes next in the problem. I have the staff members will be made up of junior directors paid $640, senior directors paid $880. Her budget for paying the staff members is no more than $9,700. Therefore, I need to have a less than or equal to $9,700. I see I have that in option B. Option C does not have that. C is out. A, C, and D are out. B must be correct. So just like that, B is correct. You see that I didn't even have to read from she must hire at least 2 senior directors. I didn't have to read any of that. So I'll go ahead and put that in green. And you can see just how much I actually got out of reading. I got out of reading all of that. Okay, just by using this. Now, obviously, if you had a bunch of extra time, you could go back, check your answer, make sure that X and Y mean what we think they mean, to check your work, make sure it's correct. But if you're in a rush, you can obviously tell that's going to be correct. Even if you're not in a rush, you can kind of tell that's going to be correct. So as always, today I have an SAT math tip and trick that can be applied to the math no calculator and the math with calculator sections that deals with exponents with the same base being divided and multiplied, as well as having an exponent raised to a power and then that raised to a power as well. I'll explain all 3 of those rules in today's video, and this is going to be applicable to question 11 from SAT practice test 7. I'm going to use this question to illustrate the rule for math in doing this. So I take a look at this equation. I have the expression x to the power of -2 times y to the power of 1/2, all divided by the quantity x to the power of 1/3 times y to the power of -1, where x is greater than 1 and y is greater than 1. It's equivalent to which of the following below. Okay, so in order to solve this, if you have exponents with the same base, so in this case I have x, that's the same base, and they're each raised to a power and you're dividing them, what that means is you're going to subtract. So in this case, you're going to have x to the -2, okay, and then you're just going to subtract that 1/3 from it since you're dividing them. So you're going to end up with then x to the -2 and 1/3. Okay, you could rewrite that then as x to the negative 7 over 3. Now what you can do then is just find which denominator, right? And obviously, since this is simplified, if you have a negative exponent, so in this case x to the negative 7 over 3, that's the same as 1 over x to the 7 3 in the denominator. That's what that negative sign means. So that's another thing that you should know. So now I know that my x has to be in my denominator. I see that that's true in a, b, c, and d. So I can't get rid of anything just based on that. But when I look at x being to the power of 7/3 in my denominator, I see that I only have that in option D, right? We have x squared, which is the same as x to the 6/3, and then we have the third root of x, which is the same as x to the 1/3, right? So x to the 6/3, and then we have x to the 1/3. Okay, and we know that that obviously, since we're multiplying, that means we're adding, and obviously that gets us x to the 7/3. Okay, which is obviously the same thing that we got when we divided. So we know our answer there is going to have to be D. Now we can go ahead and do y just for practice, although we would not need to solve for y in this situation because we know that x is correct, right? So we wouldn't even have to solve for y if we were taking this as a real SAT, unless we just wanted to check our work. But obviously just based on x, we know D is the correct answer, because if we look at our denominators in A, B, and in C, none of them have x to the 7/3 in the denominator. So D would have to be our answer. But we can go ahead and do y just for practice. So we have y to the 1/2. Obviously, we're going to have to subtract this -1. So we're going to have y to the 1/2, and we got to subtract then -1 from it. So subtracting -1, we see that a minus a negative is obviously going to give us a plus positive. So we're going to have then y to the 1/2, and then we're adding 1 to that. That's going to give us y to the 3/2. Okay, y to the 3/2. We go down, take a look at D. Obviously, we see D has y to the 3/2 because y to the 3/2 is equal to y times the square root of y. Because obviously that's y to the 1, and then times the square root of y, which is obviously y to the 1/2. You add those, you get y to the 3/2 power. Now, one thing I want to add here is just that if you were to multiply something with the same base, let's say that we had x to the 3rd power, right? And we're not multiplying here, we're actually raising to a power. And let's say we're raising that to the 2nd power. You're just going to multiply those two. So then you would end up with x to the 6. Let's say we had x to the, I'll go 4th power. Okay, and let's say we raised it to the 3rd power. Then you're going to end up with x to the 12th. So that's just one thing to note here as far as explaining the rules with exponents with the same base. Now, one thing that could trip you up is if you forget to have the same base. Okay, in order to use these rules of subtracting when dividing and adding when multiplying and multiplying your exponents by each other when you're raising something to that power, you're going to want to have that same base, right? Or for this one right here, I'll go ahead and box it. Obviously, there's no same base because you're just raising something to a power and then to another power. But with the multiplying and dividing rule and the adding and subtracting, you're going to want to make sure you have the same base because you have to have the same base for that to be applicable. So hopefully this video is helpful. Today I have an SAT math tip and trick that deals with the sum of perfect squares. I'm going to illustrate this tip and trick through question 15 from SAT Practice Test 6. So make sure to like, subscribe, and share. And with that, let's go ahead and get into this tip and trick. So we have an equation. We're asked which of the following is equivalent to it. We've got a plus b over 2. It's obviously squared. Now what this is this is going to be the sum of perfect squares. If you don't know the sum of perfect squares, it states that. I'll go ahead and give an example with x and y. Let's say we have x plus y squared. The sum of perfect squares tells us we're going to have x squared plus 2xy plus y squared. So what that means is we're going to take our last term, and it's going to be obviously squared, and we're going to take that first term, and it's obviously going to be squared, and our middle term then, since we have x times that y, will be that 2xy. So let's go ahead and apply that rule of the sum of perfect squares to this equation up top, this a plus b over 2 squared. We know obviously we're going to get a squared then, and we know that we're going to have this a, obviously it would get times the b in the other equation, and that's going to give us plus 2, because we have 2xy right here. Our xy term in this case would be a times b over 2. And then obviously we would have plus b over 2. Obviously that has to get squared, right? That b over 2, that whole thing has to get squared. Now b over 2 squared like that, that's going to give us b squared over 4 because 2 squared is 4. So that would give us b squared over 4. B squared over 4. Obviously the 2's cancel here, and we see we would have a squared plus ab plus b squared over 4. Now, in this case, when you see this equation, you should be able to immediately recognize that that's going to be the sum of perfect squares, and you should know immediately your answer then would be D. Now, I'm going to go ahead and illustrate this slowed down so you can just see how it works, right? We've got a plus b over 2 squared. Now, I'm going to show it with a plus b over 2 multiplied like this. Now, keep in mind that the form that I'm squaring right now in blue is the same as the part I'm squaring up top in blue, the same as it was written in the question above. Okay, so now I'm just going to show you how I do this. Okay, and why this works. Obviously, we could use FOIL or whatever. We're going to do our a times our a. That's going to give us a squared. Then we do our a times b over 2. That's going to give us plus ab over 2. Then we're going to do our b over 2 times a. Now, once again, we see we have plus ab over 2, which is the same as 2 times ab over 2, in which case those 2's would cancel. Now we've got b over 2 times b over 2. That's obviously going to give us b squared over 4. Okay, now we see that we have 2 of these terms right here, right? I'll put arrows going towards them. So you see that? So obviously we have 2ab over 2. We have 2 of them. We are adding them. So we see our 2's are going to cancel there, and we're going to have ab, a squared plus ab plus b squared over 4. So our answer there is obviously going to be D. Now, you want to make sure that you have this trick memorized, because if you have this trick memorized, then immediately when you see that equation up top, you immediately know you're going to have a squared, which obviously is in a, b, c, and d, so that doesn't help you much. But then you know that you're going to have b over 2. That when that is squared, you know you're going to have b squared over 4. So that helps you get rid of c, helps you get rid of a. And then for your middle term, you know you're going to have 2 times ab over 2, which will leave you with ab. So you know your answer then would be D. And you wouldn't even have to write anything because you have that memorized. So what I'm recommending you do is memorize that sum of perfect squares rule. And if you do that, it's going to save you a lot of time on the SAT math section. So hopefully that was helpful. Today I have an SAT math tip and trick that you can use to save time on the SAT math section. So this tip deals with question 11 from SAT practice test 8. So I'll quick go through the question, and as I go through I will illustrate to you how to apply this tip in order to save time and get to the correct answer very efficiently. So if we look at this question, obviously we're given a graph and we're asked which of the following could be the equation of the graph above. So this is a fairly common question on the SAT math section for the with calculator or the without calculator. It could show up on either section. So when I see this question, the first thing I want to look at in my answer choices is I see I have it going up at the end on my left side and also going up on the end on my right side. So my end limit behavior is both going up. So I know I have to have x to an even integer, right? It has to be an even number. So it could be x squared, it could be x to the fourth, but either way it's going to have to be an even number. Okay, so I look at these, I have option A. I see I have 1x, 2x, 3x's, they're getting multiplied, so that's going to give me something with x cubed. So I know that that has to be wrong because that's x to the power of an odd integer. I look at B, I see that that's going to give me x to the fourth since I have x squared times x and times x. Next up, I see that C has x times 1x and then times another x, so that will once again give me x cubed, so that has to be incorrect because x cubed would look something like that, right? Or something where it doesn't have the two end behaviors going up. If it's even, they both have to go up. If it's odd, then it's not going to be that case. One will go up and one will go down if it's an odd integer that x is raised to. And then I look at D. D, I have x squared times x and times x, so once again that'll give me x to the fourth. So that is x to the power of an even integer, therefore that could also be my correct answer. The next thing then that I'm going to look at to get to my correct answer is where my roots are, right? Where are my zeros? I see I have a 0 here, a 0 here, and a 0 here. So let's just go ahead and take a look at 2. Okay, if I want 0, or if I want 2 as one of my zeros, I need to have x minus 2 in my equation. So I'll take a look, I see that I only have x minus 2 between B and D. I only have x minus 2 in answer choice B, thus B has to be my correct answer. Okay, so the tip here that you can use to save time, it's really twofold, or two parts to this trick. First part is looking at end behavior, right? If they're both going up, then we have to have x raised to an even integer. If one was going up and one was going down, then x would be raised to an odd integer. Okay, the other thing that we want to look at is our zeros. So if we have a graph like this and we're looking at which equation represents it, we want to take a look at our zeros or our roots. So in this case, we had a root at -3, which means that we would want to have x plus 3 in some part of our equation. We had a root at 0 and we had a root at 2, right? So we want to make sure that we have this x minus 2 and this x plus 3, which we see we do in option B. Okay, so that's a tip you can use to identify the equations of graphs on the SAT math section. So hopefully that was helpful. Today I have an SAT math tip and trick for you that deals with setting up ratios. So the way that you set up a ratio can really help you save time if you know how to set it up correctly. So for this example, for this tip, I'm going to go ahead and illustrate it through question 3 from SAT practice test 8, the math with calculator section. So in a random sample of 200 cars of a particular model, 3 have a manufacturing defect. At this rate, how many of 10,000 cars of the same model will have a manufacturing defect? Okay, we know that 3 out of 200 cars have a manufacturing defect in the sample. We know that we're told it's at the same rate. So we want to know how many out of 10,000 then will have that defect. Okay, so that what you'll notice right here is that I put my variable I want to solve for, x, which is the number of cars that will have a manufacturing defect out of 10,000, on top. Now, why did I put that on top? So obviously I put my 3 on top over here, but I could have just as well done 200 over 3 equals 10,000 over x. So why did I choose to set it up like this, right? With that 3 over 200 equals x over 10,000. Well, here's why. Because it's going to save me steps and help me get to my correct answer faster. Because when I multiply then each side by 10,000, I'm left with x. So we notice that all I had to do is multiply each side by 10,000 to get my answer. Because now I have 3 times 10,000 over 200. I plug that in my calculator, and that's going to give me 150. So I know that x then has to equal 150, so my answer will be A. Okay, so why does setting it up like this with the variable that I want to solve for on top save me time? Well, I'll go ahead and show you. If I was to set it up with the variable I want to solve for on the bottom in my denominator, then I have to multiply each side by x. Okay, so that's one step. Then I have to multiply each side by 3. Okay, so now I've got 3 times 10,000. Then I got to divide each side by 200. So what you notice there is that there were 2 more steps at least in solving this problem, right? So look at how much more work that bottom one is versus just multiplying by the denominator that is below my numerator of x, okay? So look at how many more steps this bottom setup is versus the top. So that's why anytime you're setting up a ratio, you want the variable that you want to solve for to be in your numerator if it's possible. Because by doing that, you're going to save yourself time in steps, right? And the other thing is by doing less steps, you're less likely to make a mistake. So that makes it a lot more efficient, and it also makes it so you're more likely to get the correct answer because you're not doing as many steps that could lead to a mistake. So anytime that you're asked to solve for something dealing with ratios like this, try to put the variable that you want to solve for on top in your numerator, and that'll help you save time on the SAT math section. For today's reading practice, what we're going to do is I'm going to take you through 2 different question sets or passages from the SAT reading section of SAT Practice Test 6. So the first question set we're going to look at are questions 33 to 42. So that's going to deal with a dual passage set. So we're going to have one passage and a second passage. So what I'm going to do for this one is I'm going to explain the strategy that I use for dual passage sets like these, because it is a little bit of a different strategy than for question sets in which there is only one passage. And then after I go through questions 33 and 42 and this dual passage set, I'm going to go do the second question set in SAT Practice Test 6, so I'll do that passage as well. So for now, we got questions 33 to 42. This passage set is going to deal with, it's a history passage, and then the other passage we're going to do after this is going to be a social science passage. So with that, let's go ahead and get started with this question set. So we got questions 33 to 42. Now, obviously, this is going to have 2 different passages. We have a passage 1 and a passage 2. So I'm going to quick talk about my tip, trick, and advice and strategy for tackling these dual passage sets. So I'm going to go over to my right of my screen here, and I'm just going to quick outline how I deal with these. So for dual passage SAT reading sections, okay, these are the ones where you have one passage and a second passage, and you only have one question set dealing with both of them. So the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to address or tackle or read my little prompt right here. Okay, so this little introduction type of box, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to read that whole thing. So I'm going to read that whole thing first. So let's go ahead and do that. We have passage 1 is adapted from Abraham Lincoln, addressed to the Young Men's Lyceum of Springfield, Illinois, originally delivered in 1838. Passage 2 is from Henry David Thoreau, titled Resistance to Civil Government, originally published in 1849. So we see that the second passage is coming after the first. All right, so that's the first thing that I'm going to do. Now after that, what I'm going to do, so first thing we'll read your little intro prompt thing, right? And I'm not talking about the intro paragraph, I'm talking about that little intro thing I just squared. All right, then the next thing we're going to do after that is we're just going to read passage 1. So you're doing it basically the same type of read through that I recommend doing on all the other passages, but you're only doing it for passage 1 to start. After that, what you're going to do is you're going to answer the questions that deal only with passage 1. So answer the questions that are only on passage 1. So answer the questions only on passage 1. So we'll put P1 for passage 1. Okay, after that, what's going to happen is you're going to be answering your questions, and you're going to get to a question that says something about passage 2. At that point, what you're going to do is you're going to stop what you're doing, and you're going to go read passage 2. So once again, reading passage 2 just like you would normally do it, your read through, not doing anything crazy. And then your 5th step then is going to be to answer the questions that are only on passage 2. So answer the questions on passage 2. So answer your questions that are only on passage 2. Okay, now your final step at that point, you've read both passages, is you're going to answer all of the questions that ask about both of them together. So answer your questions that ask about both passage 1 and passage 2. Okay, so why is this the recommended strategy that I use to score 1590 and that I recommend you use? Well, let's think about it for a minute. After we read that first passage, it's all fresh in our head, right? So if we go and we answer the questions that are only on passage 1 next, we're not going to confuse anything with passage 2. So keep in mind, when you have 2 passages like this, oftentimes they're about the same topic, right? So by reading passage 1 first and answering the questions on passage 1, we're not going to confuse anything between passage 1 and 2. then at that point, when we go and read passage 2 and then answer the questions on passage 2, it's even less likely that we're going to confuse the two passages together, since we had spatial separation between our time reading each one. So that's why we do this, is to avoid confusion between the two passages. And at that point, we just go and we answer the questions that are about both of them. So that's how I do these dual passage sets on the SAT. That's how I recommend you do them as well. So with that, let's go ahead and follow that strategy. All right, so we got passage 1. Let's do our read through. Anything that I highlight is something that if the SAT is on paper pencil, I'd be underlining, or if it's on computer, if there's a highlight tool, I'd be using that, or I'd just be, if you're allowed to use scrap paper, I'd put a note down, or if they don't allow either of those, I guess just making a mental note. But with that, let's go ahead and get started. So the main things I'm going to look to underline with history passages like this, since this is a history passage, are going to be things such as claims and addresses to counter arguments. As well, when I start reading passage 2, I'll also look for anything that connects to passage 1. Right, anything that is a refutation to passage 1, or anything that is really linked to passage 1. So those are the things I'll be looking for as I read through. So we have, let every American, every lover of liberty, every well-wisher to his prosperity swear by the blood of the Revolution never to violate in the least particular the laws of the country, and never to tolerate their violation by others. As the patriots of '76 did to the support of the Declaration of Independence, so to the support of the Constitution and the laws, let every American pledge his life, his property, and his sacred honor. Let every man remember that to violate the law is to trample on the blood of the father, and to tear the character of his own and his children's liberty. Let reverence for the laws be breathed by every American mother to the lisping babe that prattles on her lap. Let it be taught in schools, in seminaries, and in colleges. Let it be written in primers, spelling books, and in almanacs. Let it be preached from the pulpit, proclaimed in legislative halls, and enforced in courts of justice. And in short, let it become the political religion of the nation. Let the old, the young, the rich and the poor, the grave and the gay, of all sexes and tongues, the color of and colors and conditions, sacrifice unceasingly upon its altars. When I so pressingly urge a strict observance of the laws, let me not be understood as saying there are no bad laws, nor that grievances may not arise, for the redress of which no legal provisions have been made. I mean to say no such thing. But I do mean to say that although bad laws, if they exist, should be repealed as soon as possible, still, while they continue in force, for the sake of example, they should be religiously observed. So also in, let's see if I can get this to work a minute. Looks like my mouse is malfunctioning. There we go. So also in unprovided cases, if such arise, let proper legal provisions be made for them with the least possible delay. But till then, let them, if not too intolerable, be borne with. Okay, be borne with. All right, now my mouse is working again. Here we go. There is no grievance that is a fit object of redress by mob law. In any case that arises, as for instance the promulgation of abolitionism, one of two positions is necessarily true. The thing is right within itself and therefore deserves the protection of all law and all good citizens, or it is wrong and therefore proper to be prohibited by legal enactments, and in neither case is the interposition of mob law either necessary or excusable or justifiable. All right, so now we've gone through and we've read through passage 1. Let's go ahead and take a look then at our questions for passage 1. All right, so in passage 1, Lincoln contends that breaking the law has which consequence? All right, well, he talks about how breaking the law, I'll go ahead and show you where it is. Right, we highlighted it. We talked about how breaking the law is to trample on the blood of his father and to tear the character of his own and his children's liberty. Okay, so in that case, what we're talking about then is that it's really to dishonor the nation and the founding of the nation and the nation's values. So our correct answer there is going to be B. Right, it undermines and repudiates the nation's values. It never says that it slows the repeal of bad laws, so A is incorrect. And likewise, it never says that it leads slowly but inexorably to rule by the mob. Okay, it never makes that statement either. Option D, it creates divisions between social groups. We never make that statement. Okay, if we're going to pick answer choice C, we'd be looking in too narrow at the part where we talk about the word mob. So we'd be focusing too narrow there. And then option A would be focusing too narrow on the part where we talk about the repealing of these bad laws. Okay, so both of those would be too narrow answer choices. My mouse stopped working there for a minute, so I had to stop the video and restart it. So now let's go ahead and get into question 34. So which choice provides the best evidence for the answer to the previous question? Well, we already talked about this when we went back to our lines. So if we remember where the lines are, then obviously we just go back, and in this case, obviously we remember where the lines are because we just talked about them. We saw it was in lines 9 to line 12 that supported our answer of how it really is trampling on the blood of his father, tearing down the liberty of his children. So thus showing that it is repudiating the nation's founding values, right? Trampling on the blood of his father, which founded the country, thus repudiating and undermining the nation's values. So obviously we know our answer there would be A. Now let's say that we didn't know where that information was or where that evidence was. Then what we'd want to do is we'd want to take a look and use that keyword method that I talked about before. So in this case, since we're talking about repudiating and undermining the nation's values, well, what is one of the nation's values? One of the nation's values is liberty, so that would be where we would start looking, okay? So that way we don't have to just go blind. We look for keywords that tells us where to go look. So obviously we know our answer there is going to be lines 9 through 12. All right, moving on, we got question 35. As used in line 24, urge most nearly means what? Well, with any most nearly means question, we're going to use that strategy I talked about before, where we go to the line, right? We go to line 24, find the word urge, and come up with our own answer choice first. Let's go ahead and do that. So line 24, I'll go ahead and put this in blue so you can see it. We have when I so pressingly urge a strict observance of all laws, let me not be understood as saying there are no bad laws. So when he says that he's pressingly urging a strict observance of the laws, he's saying that he is pressingly advocating, that would be one word we could use, advocating a strict observance of all laws. Okay, he's urging for it, he's advocating for it, he's pushing for it. Best word here is going to be advocating if we have that as an answer. We see that we do have advocate as an answer, thus that'll be our correct answer. If we look at require, he can't himself require people to obey laws, right? He can't stimulate them to obey laws, and he can't hasten them to obey laws. So correct answer here is going to be he can pressingly advocate or urge them to obey the laws. So correct answer there is going to be D for that one. It's just a words and context question, not too difficult. All right, now we've got the sentences in lines 24 to 28, or the sentence in line 24 to 28 from when to made primarily serves which function in passage 1. Okay, as always, if we're directed to lines like that, we want to go take a look. Okay, we're asked for the purpose of them in passage 1. So that's going to be from right here, go ahead and put it there, all the way to right here. So we have when I so pressingly urge a strict observance of all the laws, let me not be understood as saying there are no bad laws, nor that grievances may not arise for the redress of which no legal provisions have been made. I mean to say no such thing. Okay, key parts here. I see that he says, I mean to say no such thing, and it says, let me not be understood. So he's really worried that they're going to misinterpret what he's saying and think that he doesn't think that any laws are bad. And that's not what he's saying. So he's really addressing a possible misinterpretation of his argument by saying this. So that's the big takeaway I have from right there. Let's see if we have an answer choice that matches that. So 36, option A, it raises and refutes a potential counter-argument to Lincoln's argument. Okay, key part here is that it's not a counter-argument. He's just worried that they're going to misinterpret what he's saying. So that's why A is wrong. Okay, because it's not a counter-argument. He's worried that they're going to misinterpret what he's saying. Option B, identifies and concedes a crucial shortcoming of Lincoln's argument. There is no shortcoming there. At least there's not like a crucial shortcoming that he's addressing there. He's just worried they're going to misinterpret what he's saying when he says that he wants laws to be followed until they are redressed through the legal system. Option C, it acknowledges and substantiates a central assumption of Lincoln's argument. Okay, it's not substantiating or acknowledging a central assumption of his argument. What it is doing is it's anticipating and correcting a possible misinterpretation of his argument. That misinterpretation being that there are no bad laws. Okay, next question. We have as used in line 32, observed most nearly means. Okay, anytime we have most nearly means question, we know that's a words and context question. So we're going to go to line 32, find the word observed, come up with our own answer choice first. So line 32, I'll put it in blue once again. We've got, for the sake of example, they should be religiously observed. Okay, he's talking about these laws, right? We have, but I do mean to say that although bad laws, if they exist, should be repealed as soon as possible, still while they continue in force, for the sake of example, they should be religiously observed or followed. Okay, followed is what would mean the same as observed right there. The laws should be religiously observed or followed. So followed would be my correct answer if we have that, which we see that we do. So our answer for 37 then will be A. Okay, we wouldn't say that the laws should be religiously scrutinized. Okay, in this case, observed is meaning follow. So option B would be incorrect. It would be a misinterpretation. Contemplated, once again, not contemplated but followed. That's what he means by saying observed here. Noticed, once again, they have to be followed. That's really the only possible correct answer here. And it is the only correct answer because there always can only be one correct answer. You got to keep that in mind, right? Observed in this sense can only mean followed. It can't mean anything else here. Okay. All right, moving on. We've got question 38 in passage 2. Thoreau indicates that some unjust aspects of government are what? Well, now we see that we are directed to passage 2. So what did I say when we see something directed to passage 2? At that point, we go and we read passage 2. So before we can answer that question, we have to go back and we have to read passage 2. So I'll get out my highlighter again, once again, taking that same initial read through strategy, highlighting the main claims and highlighting anything that links passage 1 to passage 2, as well as any counter arguments. Those are the things I look for as I read through my second passage here. Unjust laws exist Shall we be content to obey them, or shall we endeavor to amend them and obey them until we have succeeded, or shall we transgress them at once? Men generally under such a government as this think that they ought to wait until they have persuaded the majority to alter them. They think that if they should resist, the remedy would be worse than the evil, but it is the fault of the government itself that the remedy is worse than the evil. Why is it not more apt, or it makes it worse? Why is it not more apt to anticipate and provide for reform? Why does it not cherish its wise minority? Why does it cry and resist before it is hurt? If the injustice is part of the necessary friction of the government, let it go, let it go. But perchance it will wear smooth, certainly the machine will wear out. If the injustice has a spring or a pull or a rope or a crank exclusively for itself, then perhaps you may consider whether the remedy will not be worse than the evil. But if it is of such a nature that it requires you to be the agent of injustice to another, I say break the law. Let your life be a counter friction to stop the machine. What I have to do is to see at any rate that I do not lend myself to the wrong which I condemn. As for adopting the ways in which the state has provided for remedying the evil, I know not of such ways. They take too much time and a man's life will be gone. I have other affairs to attend to. I came into this world not chiefly to make this a good place to live in, but to live in it, be it good or bad. A man has not to do everything but something, and because he cannot do everything, it is not necessary that he should do something wrong. I do not hesitate to say that those who call themselves abolitionists should all at once effectually withdraw their support both in person and in property from the government, and not wait until they constitute a majority of one. Before they suffer the right to prevail through them, I think that it is enough if they have God on their side without waiting for that other one. Moreover, any man more right than his neighbors constitutes a majority of one already. All right. So just one quick note. I did notice while I was reading this, I remembered that Lincoln also used the case of abolitionism in his argument, though he didn't take it on himself. He did notice, he did make note of it. So he talked about abolitionists there, and I just also noticed that he talked about them here in passage 2 as well. So it's possible I get a question on that. That's why I put it right there. That's why I highlighted it. All right, question 38. So in passage 2, Thoreau indicates some unjust aspects of government are what? Okay, a key thing that jumped out to me right here, there's going to be a couple arguments he makes here. One argument is that some of them should just be let go, right? People should just let them wear through, not break them, not make a big fuss, just kind of let them go through. Okay, and then another part that he makes is that some unjust aspects of government also should be viewed as something that should be broken since it's unjust and it can't wait because it's so wrong. Okay, so there's two different things that we'd be looking for here. So let's take a look at our answer choices. We have option A, superficial and can be fixed easily. No, never makes that argument that it can be fixed easily or that it's superficial. B, subtle and must be studied carefully. Never makes the argument it's subtle. Never makes the argument it should be studied carefully. Option C, self-correcting and may be beneficial. Okay, he never says that it's going to be self-correcting or that it may be beneficial. Option D, inevitable. Yes, he does say that, and he does say that they should be endured. Now, I'm guessing my next question is evidence. I see that it is, so I can go ahead and show you my evidence for D as well. So, a couple of things. First off, if you remember where it is, which in this case I do, that's obviously going to help you. But let's just say, for example, that you don't remember where it is. Okay, so in this example, let's say that you don't remember where it is. What would be the keywords that we'd be looking for? Because I want you to get comfortable with the keyword strategy in case you do forget where the evidence is and you have to find it from these, because I don't want you to just guess which lines are in and have to read all of this, because that's going to be very inefficient. So let's look at the keywords we'd be looking for. Key things here are that parts of aspects of the government are inevitable and should be endured. So things that I'd be looking at are going to be word choices that tell me that something is unjust or evil. So key things that I'm looking at here, I see I have wrong, evil, and injustice in all of them. So that's not really going to help me here. So in this case, what I'm going to want to do is, since I know that it says that they are inevitable and should be endured, I'm going to want to think to where we talk about injustice being inevitable and being endured. And that's going to be where we make that example of the machine of government. Okay, so I'm going to try to find that paragraph. So if I go up, I see that I've got that paragraph talking about the machine of government. I see that it's right here. Okay, I see I have the machine of government. So in that case, since the keywords didn't necessarily help us much, the next thing I thought of is which part of the passage or which sort of general area or paragraph that evidence would be contained in. And I found it there. So which answer choice has those lines? I see that it's 58 to 59. So that's where I'm going to start. And I'm going to see if that works as my evidence here. So let's go take a look. So it says, if the injustice is part of the necessary friction of the machine or government, or that it's inevitable, it's always going to be there, then you should let it go and let it go. So key parts there, that's obviously 58 to 59. We see that it's telling us that there is some injustice that is inevitable or part of the necessary friction, key part necessary friction, thus telling us it's inevitable of the machine of government, and we're telling them to just let it go because it has to be there. So in that case, that is going to support our answer of it being inevitable and being endured, right? It says let it go, and also that it's going to be inevitable. So key answer there is going to be letter C is going to be our answer for 39. All All right, moving on, we got question number 40. So the primary purpose of each passage is to do what? So now we are on the questions that are dealing with both passages together. Okay, each passage is making an argument about how unjust laws or how laws should be followed, whether people are required to follow them, whether they aren't, if they're immoral. So they're addressing whether or not laws should be followed is what they're making an argument about. So let's take a look at A through D, find our correct answer. Option A, make an argument about the difference between legal duties and moral imperatives. No, we want to really focus in on the fact that we are discussing whether or not individuals should follow the law. That is the main primary focus. Okay, key part here being primary focus. This choice right here is too narrow. Too narrow. All right, option B, discuss how laws ought to be enacted and changed in a democracy. Once again, that's too narrow. We'd be focusing in too much on the redress of bad laws, not enough on this idea of whether or not individuals should follow all of a country's laws, which is what answer choice C says, which is why C is going to be our correct answer here. C says advance a view regarding whether individuals should follow all of the country's laws. We know in passage 1, Lincoln argues that everyone should follow the laws because they are the laws of the country, and to not do so would be to trample on your founding fathers' graves. And then on passage 2, we talk about how if a law is immoral, Thoreau argues that you shouldn't follow it. So that's going to be our main arguments there, our primary purpose there. Option D, articulate standards by which laws can be evaluated as just or unjust. This one we never actually talk about what standards to use there. So that one's just really off topic, or not off topic, but it's just way off from the primary purpose, way off. So D is incorrect as well. 41, based on the passages, Lincoln would most likely describe the behavior Thoreau recommends in lines 64 to 66 as what? Okay, once again, we're going to have to go to those lines in order to answer this question. So 64 to 66, I'll put it in red since I haven't used that color yet. Or in this case, yeah, we'll just put it in red. So 65 to 66. But if it is of such a nature that it requires you to be the agent of injustice to another, then I say break the law. So Thoreau there's arguing for breaking of the law if you view it as immoral. How is Lincoln going to respond to that? Well, Lincoln would say that that's wrong. Okay, he would say that that's trampling on your founding fathers' graves. So let's find an answer choice that says that. We have option A, an excusable reaction to an intolerable situation. No, because Lincoln argues that it's not excusable. Okay, he explicitly says that it's inexcusable to break the law. Option B, a rejection of the country's proper forms of remedy. Absolutely right. Lincoln's argument is that if you find a law that's unjust, you need to take the proper forms through the legal system to get it fixed rather than breaking it right away. Okay, option C, an honorable response to an unjust law. He doesn't view it as honorable, he views it as dishonorable. D, a misapplication of a core principle of the Constitution. Okay, we never really talk about the core principles of the Constitution and it being misapplied there. So, answer there is going to be B. That's the only one that has support from the text. 42, based on the passages, one commonality in the stances Lincoln and Thoreau take toward abolitionism is what? So you saw me kind of briefly touch on that I saw abolitionism in both passages. Now, one thing to note is that neither of these authors really chose a side in it. They just mentioned it in support for their argument. So Thoreau, he talked about abolitionism being something that, and I'll just quick show you it as well. We know that Thoreau talked about abolitionism in kind of the third person here, saying those who call themselves abolitionists. So he's not taking a side on it. He's just using it to support his argument, saying that they should go ahead and break the law since they believe that they're morally right. And we see with Lincoln, let's go ahead and find where it's at. Let's see if we can find it. I remember he did talk about it, and he didn't take a stance on it either. But he just said that abolitionists, they should be waiting to get proper redress of the laws. Right here. Okay, I found it. So I'm going to put it in red so you can see it easier. Okay, it's over on our right top corner of our screen. We have in any case that arises as, for instance, the promulgation of abolitionism. One of two positions is true, and he talks about the positions are either the thing is right, and therefore the law should be enforced and protected, or it's wrong, and therefore you should go through the proper legal enactments to change it. So neither person is taking on that position as their own, both just using it to support their argument. So I'm going to find an answer choice that says that. So we have based on the passages one commonality. We have option A, both authors see the cause as warranting drastic action. Nope, neither one views it that way, or at least expresses it in this passage that way. Option B, both authors view the cause as central to their argument. Neither one has it central to their argument. They include it in their argument, but it's not a central point. So that's why this one right here is wrong. C, neither author expects the cause to win widespread acceptance. We don't touch on widespread acceptance or not, so C is wrong. D, neither author embraces the cause as his own. That is correct. Neither one picks a side there. Both of them just using it kind of in a third person sort of sense, talking about it as a piece of evidence or an interesting case. All right, so with that, we've answered all the questions from this passage. Now what we can do is we can go ahead and go back up to our second passage in SAT Practice Test 6, and that is going to be the last passage we're going to do today for the reading section. So this is going to be a social science passage, so I'm going to talk specifically about some tips for the social science passages, as well as just some tips overall for the reading section as I go through. So once again, I'm going to do that same initial read through I do. Now with the social science passages, what I'm looking to highlight or in your case, if you're taking it paper pencil, underline, or if you're taking it online, I'd imagine there's a highlighter tool or you're allowed scrap paper or something like that. So the things I'm going to highlight as I go through here are going to be things such as claims. I'm not going to highlight evidence. Make sure you're not highlighting evidence because you're just going to end up highlighting pretty much the whole thing with science passages and social science passages. So highlighting claims. I'm going to highlight anything that addresses a counterargument in these. I'm going to highlight anything that is shown as shocking. Anything that's shocking, I'll pay attention to. So key things, main claims, counterarguments, anything that is really shocking. Those are going to be the main three things I'm going to highlight on social science passages. All right, so with that, let's go ahead and get started. So we have the passage adopted from Stephen Coleman, Scott Anthony, and David E. Morrison, titled Public Trust in the News, copyright 2009, so pretty recent. All right, so we have the news as a form of public knowledge. Unlike personal or private knowledge, such as the health of one's friends and families, the conduct of a private hobby, a secret liaison. Public knowledge increases in value as it is shared by more people. Okay, we have the date of an election and the claims of rival candidates, the causes and consequences of an environmental disaster, a debate about how to frame a particular law, the latest reports from a war zone. These are all examples of public knowledge that people are generally expected to know in order to be considered informed citizens. Thus, in contrast to personal or private knowledge, which is generally left to individuals to pursue or ignore, public knowledge is promoted even to those who might not think it matters to them. In short, the circulation of public knowledge, including the news, is generally regarded as a public good which cannot be solely demand-driven. The production, circulation, and reception of public knowledge is a complex process. It is generally accepted that public knowledge should be authoritative, but there is not always common agreement about what the public needs to know, who is best placed to relate it, and how authoritative reputations should be determined and evaluated. Historically, newspapers such as the Times and broadcasters such as the BBC were widely regarded as the trusted shapers of authoritarian agendas and conventional wisdom. They embodied the Oxford English Dictionary's definition of authority as the power over or title to influence the opinions of others. As part of the general process of the transformation of authority, whereby there has been a reluctance to uncritically accept traditional sources of public knowledge, the demand has been for all authority to make explicit the frames of value for which determine their decisions. Centers of news production, as our focus groups show, have not been exempt from this process. Not surprisingly, perhaps some news journalists feel uneasy about the renegotiation of their authority. Editors are increasingly casting a glance, and just keep in mind that when you have indentation like this, right, you see that it's indented, then it's pretty much going to be like a reference to someone else saying something. We have references right here. Okay, so just keep that in mind. Okay, so just keep that in mind. I'll go ahead and re-underline that. I don't know why I got rid of my underlines there. All right, so editors are increasingly casting a glance at the most read lists on their own and others' websites to work out which stories matter to readers and viewers. And now the audience, which used to know its place, is being asked to act as a kind of journalistic ombudsman, ruling on our credibility. The result of democratizing access to TV news could be political disengagement by the majority and a dumbing down through a popularity contest of stories. Despite the rhetorical bluster of these statements, they amount to more than straightforward professional defensiveness. In their reference to an audience which used to know its place in conflation between democratization and dumbing down, they are seeking to argue for a particular mode of public knowledge, one which is shaped by experts, immune from populist pressures, and disseminated to attentive but mainly passive recipients. It is a view of citizenship that closes down opportunities for popular involvement in the making of public knowledge by reinforcing the professional claims of experts. The journalists quoted above are right to feel uneasy, for there is at almost every institutional level in contemporary society skepticism towards the epistemological authority of elites. There is a growing feeling, as expressed by several of our focus group participants, that the news media should be informative rather than authoritative. The job of journalists should be to give the news as raw as it is without putting their slant on it, and people should be given sufficient information from which we should be able to draw our own opinions. At stake here are two distinct conceptions of authorities. The journalists we have quoted are resistant to the democratization of news, the supremacy of the clickstream, according to which editors raise or lower the profiles of stories according to the number of readers clicking on them online. The parody of popular culture with serious news, the demands of some audience members for news rather than constructed narratives. Okay, and then we're going to have some data tables right there. So now let's go ahead and get into our questions. As you saw, main things I was highlighting there were going to be claims. There was kind of a counter argument in the references of those quotations to the newspapers. So those are the main things I was underlining there. All right, so now we have the main purpose of the passage is to do what? Obviously, it's a purpose question. Key thing here, we want to pay attention to the main focus or the main purpose, which means we want to look big picture. So my mouse went out again, but let's just go ahead and get back into what we're talking about with question 11. So the big picture, if we're looking big picture at this passage, then what we want to focus in on is the fact that we're talking about a change in perception of the news over time. We talked about how right around the 1980s and 1970s, there was a lot more trust and places like, or companies like the BBC and the Times to provide accurate news stories, and there's just trust with them. And it talks about how over time now, the public now wants the information just to come raw without a spin and without any sort of opinion from the publishers. So let's go ahead and take a look at an answer choice that talks about that change over time. So we have option A, analyze the technological developments that have affected the production, circulation, and reception of stories. We don't focus in on the technological developments. That's not the main purpose. Okay, key part here is main purpose. So A is wrong. B, discuss changes in the perception of the news media as a source of public knowledge. Yes, we talk about that change over time and what the public wants and also what the publishers are giving them. Option C, show how journalists' frame of value influence the production of news stories. This is too narrow. Okay, keep in mind we want the main purpose of the passage. This would be too narrow because we'd be focusing in too much on that part where we talk about journalists' frame of value and how consumers want that to be public now. So that would be too narrow of an answer choice. D, challenge the conventional view that news is a form of public knowledge. We aren't challenging that view. That's why D is incorrect. All right, now we got question 12. According to the passage, which expectations do traditional authorities now face? Well, I kind of talked about that in 11, and we know that the expectation that they are now facing is that they are going to be transparent in their views and beliefs. So they're going to be transparent or upfront and tell the consumers why they are publishing what they are publishing and what they believe in at their news organization. So let's find an answer choice that talks about that. We have option A, they should be uninfluenced by commercial considerations. We never make that argument. B, they should be committed to bringing about positive social change. Never make that argument either. And watch out for things like this on the SAT. I want to quick talk about this. So on the SAT, sometimes they will put answer choices that are meant for you to pick them because you believe them personally and politically. Don't pick an answer just because you believe it personally or politically, because you're probably going to get it wrong. You have to pick the answer that is supported by evidence in the text, because any answer choice that is correct on the SAT has to be supported by evidence from the text. And if your answer doesn't have evidence from the text, but you believe it personally, don't pick it because it's going to be wrong. And your goal on the SAT is to get as many right as you can. So don't pick an answer choice just because you believe it personally or politically. Okay, so that's just one thing I wanted to point out there. C, they should be respectful of the difference between public and private knowledge. Once again, not making that argument, or at least it's not. Yeah, we're just not making that argument. So C is incorrect. D, they should be transparent about their beliefs and assumptions. Yes, okay, we talked about how they should be upfront and tell consumers about those beliefs and consumptions. I'm guessing evidence is the next question. I see that it is. So let's say that I don't know where that is, right? Let's say that we just don't remember where in the passage it is. Obviously, what we're going to want to be thinking about then, as far as keywords, is we're going to be looking for things about the decision-making process, as well as, yeah, pretty much the decision-making process. We want transparency in that decision-making process. So the key things that I'm going to look at here is I have decisions and I have process. So those would be the first two spots I would look. Editors and viewers, that seems like it comes too late in the passage, also because it's lines 43, 46, 2 and 5. I know for a fact we weren't talking about that in the intro. So sometimes you can get rid of them just off of that if you know it wasn't occurring in those lines because that was way too early. But yeah, so first two spots I'd be looking at is decisions and process. I know that lines 20 to 21 was also pretty early on, and we weren't really talking about transparency at that point. So I'm going to go ahead and start with this decisions here in lines 33 to 38, right? That would be the strategy that I'd be using if I were you. So let's go take a look at 33 to 38. We see that we have, as part of the general process of transformation of authority, whereby there has been a reluctance to uncritically accept traditional sources of public knowledge, the demand has been for all authority to make explicit the frames of value which determine their decisions. So that's talking about how they want transparency. We see that that's going to be lines, looks like 33 to 38 or 32 to 38, so that'll be our correct answer there. We see that we got answer choice C then for number 13. All right, that one's perfect for our evidence, thus we can go ahead and take that one and we can move on. All right, so key things there. Also with the keyword strategies, just remember, you can't just pick the keyword. You got to go back to the evidence like I just did and check to make sure it's correct. As used in line 24, common most nearly means. Once again, words in context question. We're going to go to line 24, figure out what common most nearly means on our own. So line 24. All right, I'll put common in blue so we can see where it is. We've got, but there is not always common agreement about what the public needs to know. So there's not always common agreement. In this case, I would be looking for shared, would also same thing as comma here. I would also look for widespread. So shared and widespread would be my two picks there. Shared would be my number one option if we have it. Widespread would be my number two. Let's go see if we've got either of those. So we've got, we don't have shared, but we do have widespread. So this widespread is going to be our answer there. Okay. Now in this case, if we look at why A, B, and D are wrong, we can go ahead and do that as well. Okay. So we talked about common I believe it was common. Let's just go back. I can just quick check it real quick. I believe we talked about common agreement. Yep, so common agreement. Now, that would be a shared agreement or widespread agreement. It wouldn't be categorized as familiar agreement or numerous agreement. We wouldn't categorize it as numerous agreement, but widespread agreement or shared agreement among all the people. Okay, also wouldn't describe it as ordinary agreement. Question 15. The author would most likely include the extended quotations in lines 43 to 53 to do what? Okay, that's going to be where we talked about those quotations from those outside sources. And the reason behind that, right, if we get a little bit of context before that, I can go ahead and show you. The reason behind that is we wanted to give the journalists something to say, right? We wanted to cite their opinion. Okay, so this is their opinion on the renegotiation of their authority. So we wanted to cite representative opinions of these journalists that we were talking about and discussing in the text. So correct answer for 15 then, like I just said, we're going to cite those representative opinions. We want to give them a chance to give their side of the story. Option A, presenting contradictory examples. Those examples, we don't really provide examples, A, and then B, they're also not contradictory. Option C, criticizing typical viewpoints. We're not criticizing them. Answer to C is wrong. And then D, suggesting viable alternatives. We don't offer viable alternatives, thus D is incorrect as well. All right, question 16. The authors indicate that the public is coming to believe that journalist reports should avoid what? Okay, this is going to be that personal spin. Okay, the personal spin or opinion. Okay, we talk about that. I'm guessing my next question is evidence. We can just check if it is, because if it is, then I can go and find that for you as well. We see that our next question is for evidence, right? We want to talk about how they want to avoid the personal judgments about the events that they are reporting on. Okay, so correct answer for 16 there is going to be A, right? We want to talk about how they don't want that spin. They want the news raw. Okay, so that part where we talk about the news being raw is going to be our evidence. So if we go back up, I believe we highlighted that, or I don't think we did actually, but we talk about how we want the information as raw. Okay, so right here. So we talk about information being informative rather than authoritative. We want the news raw. We don't want any spin on it. We want to make our opinions on our own. So we see that that's pretty much lines. Looks like our sentence starts up here. So that's going to be line 70 all the way down to 77 as my evidence there. Okay, so in that case, if you remember, like I said, anytime you remember where the evidence is, just go find it. If you didn't, then we'd obviously be looking at keywords. So let's just think about, let's say that we didn't know where the evidence was. Let's run through the keyword strategy one more time. Okay, keyword strategy. We're looking for people making opinions on their own. We're looking for places avoiding personal judgment. So I'd be looking for words such as judgments and something like own. Okay, so in this case, obviously, another thing that I can do is I know we didn't talk about that early on, so I could probably get rid of A and B just because I know we didn't talk about it early on. I see the word own as my keyword, thus I would start with looking at lines 70 to 77 by using the keyword method. And then after that, I would probably go back and I'd look at that one second, but you shouldn't be looking at that one second because as soon as you look at option of lines 70 to 77, you'd recognize it's the correct answer. So that one would be easy there, really efficient as well. So answer is going to be D for 17. Okay, question 18. As used in line 74, raw most nearly means what? And this one, we pretty much were just there. So if you were ever just at a passage and you're 100% confident you know what it means for a most nearly means question, I suppose that you could go ahead and answer. For example, in this case, we know raw is going to mean the unfiltered truth or the unfiltered news, right? It's not going to mean the exposed news. It's not going to be the harsh news. It's not going to be the inexperienced news. But that's really dangerous in just answering it, even if you just read it for these most nearly means questions, because they really should be fairly easy points. I would pretty much say you should almost never, ever just answer it without going back to the text, because these ones should be easy points for you on the SAT reading section. So anytime you see it, I got to recommend that you go back to the text. So let's go ahead and do that. Line 74, we have raw. Okay, what does raw most nearly mean? We see that we have the job of journalists should be to give the news as raw as it is without putting their slant on it. People should be giving sufficient information. So once again, as the news as raw as it is or as unfiltered as it is, as unfiltered as possible. Okay, so unfiltered would be our answer there. All right, now we've got question 19 based on the table. So now we're going to do some data interpretation questions. In which year were people most trusting of the news media? So we've got our options there. Let's go find which year they're most trusting. So we have percentage of respondents seeing news stories as inaccurate or favoring one side. So we've got news organizations. Okay, we see in 1985, people were really trusting. They see that we have the highest level of them saying that news organizations get the facts straight, lowest level of them saying they have inaccurate stories. And then if we look at our next category, we have the highest level of them being independent. We have the lowest level of them being influenced by powerful people and organizations. So we see that we're a lot more trusting. We also see that we have highest level of dealing fairly with all sides, lowest level of tending to favor one side. So much more trusting of the media in 1985. So our correct answer there is going to be 1985. So option A for 19. All right, question 20. Which statement is best supported by information presented in the table? Okay, so I talked a little bit about this in my data interpretation tip video that you saw, I think, in day 4. So I talk about how with these ones, you've got a couple of options. Option A is you go ahead and take a look at your graph, come up with a general idea of the graph or the data table, and then go through options A through D, find which one's correct. Option B is you can just start by taking a look at A, see what it says, and then go see if it's correct, and then go B, see what it says, see if it's correct. So in this case, let's just go take a general look at the table, and let's use that method. That's the method I generally use, in my opinion, on the SAT reading section. I'd say most of the time I get a general idea and then go through all those options. So let's take a look. So I see over time I have a percentage of getting the facts straight lower. Okay, so that's going to indicate distrust is increasing over time. I see the people who view them as having inaccurate stories rises. So once again, them viewing them more distrusting over time. More people saying that they're less independent and are more likely to be influenced by powerful organizations and institutions over time. So I see an increase in distrust over time. Same thing down here. We see a decrease in them saying that they deal fairly with all sides. So increased distrust over time is my general trend there. All right, 20. Option A, between 1985 and 2011, the proportion of inaccurate news stories rose dramatically. Okay, here's why that's wrong. Because that table, it can't tell us whether or not the proportion of inaccurate news stories rose dramatically, because that's something that's supposed to be objective, and this is the opinions of people, which are automatically subjective, right? People are subjective, facts are objective, thus we can't call it a correct. B, between 1992 and 2003, the proportion of people who believed news organizations were biased almost doubled. This one right here, we're just going to have to go check, right? I don't think that it did, but we'll just make sure. So we have people believing news organizations were biased, 1992 to 2003. Okay, so news organizations, this one we pretty much got to look at the numbers. We see that we've got from 2000 and, or what did it say, what years? I think 92 to 2003 were the years. Yes, 92 to 2003. It doesn't look like we got doubling there, right? We see we go from 49 to 36, that's not a double. 44 to 56, not a double. 35 to 23, also not a double. 58, 70, not a double. So we're not dealing in things of doubling there. So that one's going to be wrong. Option C, between 2003 and 2007, people's views of the accuracy, independence, and fairness of news changed very little. I believe that is going to be correct because it doesn't look like between 2003 and 2007 there's much change. We have a change of 3 here, change of 3 here, change of 0 there, change of 1 there. As we can see, not much changed at all, change of 0, change of 0. So correct answer there is going to be C. There's very little change between those years. Answer there will be C. All right, now we got question 21. The 2011 data in the table best serves as evidence of what? All right, well, 2011 data in the table, what is it serving as evidence of? Okay, we got different lines here. Well, we know over time that we see increased skepticism towards the news and increased distrust towards the news, as I talked about when I talked about the general trend in that data table. So we're going to find an answer choice that says something about that. Option A, the political disengagement by the majority. They're not disengaged, they just don't trust the news media anymore. Option B, the professional claims of experts. We aren't talking about that, so that's wrong. And then C, skepticism towards the epistemological authority of expert elites. Okay, skepticism towards those expert elites doing the news media, those journalists. Correct answer there will be C. Option D, the supremacy of the clickstream. That's not what that data table is showing. Okay, it's showing that people are distrusting of the news media and these expert elites. So correct answer there will be C. So that takes us through our reading practice for today. Hopefully it was helpful. Hopefully you got some big takeaways. Really a key thing that I really want you to take away was when we talked about those dual passages and that strategy there. That strategy for those dual passages I think is really important. I think it's a really good strategy to use. So you want to make sure you're using that one. And then the key other things to take away is really we just got a lot more practice. You got a little bit more insight into what I'm looking for and things like that. Keep in mind that obviously I'm going slower than I would on the real SAT because I'm explaining things to you and I'm trying to teach you as I go through this. We're going to touch more on pacing. We will touch on pacing and how to move quickly through reading sections, through the math section, and through the writing section before the end of this 14-day series is up. So if you're worried that I'm going slow right now, don't worry. I will show you how to go faster and have good pacing on the SAT for all the sections before this 14 days is up. So don't worry about that. So hopefully this video was helpful. If it was, make sure to like, subscribe, and share. And as always, have a great day.